Hey, it's James from 4x4 Earth here, and welcome to track 43 of the 4x4 Earth podcast, Roothy and Milo's last big trip.
Join James from 4x4earth.com as he learns all there is to know about four-wheel driving, camping, fishing, and getting out and exploring our great country on the 4x4 Earth podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Really excited today because we have got Australia's most iconic and experienced four-wheel driver, Roothy, and he's going to be telling us the story of what he's been up to and, more importantly, what he's been up to with Milo. So let's get right into the story now. Hey Roothy, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, James. This is a real honour. Good on you, mate.
Oh, thank you. So, what have you been up to? What's news with Milo?
Oh, yeah, righto. You've heard, haven't you? Okay. Look, basically, last time I got pulled over by a policeman, a friend of mine in Tambo, it took about 5 minutes to undo the hockey strap that was holding the driver's door shut. Milo's reached a stage where when I chuck her up on the hoist, the doors spring open on their own. It's nothing a new chassis and a new body wouldn't sort out and a complete rebuild. But I had I've just been putting that off because, you know, that after 20 years, that truck and I share a lot of DNA. And I just kept putting it off. And then late last year, the CEO of the National Motoring Museum in South Australia, it's at the Blackwood Mill. This is actually a government motoring museum. It's the only government motoring museum. So it's where they keep things forever. And he said, look, you know, Milo's a pretty important truck. I mean, these guys have got the first Holden and the first Nast across Australia. And they got the firsts of everything, you know.
Yep.
I think somewhere in there they've got the Leyland's Land Rover and all sorts of stuff. But anyway, because it's government owned as opposed to private owned, I talked to the guy and he said, look, you know, how would you like to donate Milo to the people of Australia? And the word that didn't ring real good there was donate. but he made a joke out of it. And he said, look, you might as well give it to Australia because, let's face it, John, I've seen some of your stuff and half the people of Australia have probably pushed it at some stage. So, okay, fair enough. You know, he sort of got me on that one. And to be honest, it's a bit of an honour. I think what swung it was in several conversations. His name's Paul Reed. He's an Englishman. And in several conversations with him, I got the feeling that it was just a great legacy for the truck, a really good legacy for the truck, a really good place for it to go and be on display forever and ever. And, of course, I guess the other side of that is that they're holding a special celebration of four-wheel driving weekend in May, and that's kind of signifying Milo's entry to the museum. I'm going to drive it over there in May. That'll be my last trip in the old girl and pop her in the museum. So it's kind of major sad, but it's also, if I'd rebuilt it, it wouldn't have been the same truck. So I'm very proud in one sense. And I'm kind of happy too, James, because for the National Motoring Museum to want to do something to celebrate our four-wheel driving lifestyle, in a way it's a bit as if the government's finally recognising that we exist as a lifestyle, as opposed to just being, you know, guys that need four-wheel drives for work purposes, which has always been part of it. So it's a bit like, in my mind, four-wheel driving's coming of age by picking the worst, dirtiest, cheapest old truck amongst the whole fleet and chucking it on display. So, yeah, there you go. I've got to make an official announcement about that at some stage. Might as well be here.
Excellent. Well, it is quite an honour, but really it's quite fitting because it would be Australia's most recognisable four-wheel drive, wouldn't it? I can't think of anything that more people would have an affinity to. And the thing that I'm always amazed at is when you're at a show, the line of people who want to see, you know, Milo is, it's huge, isn't it?
I think half the time they can't believe you can actually go places in something that looks like that. You know?
Yep.
But look, it's true to say that the last 20 years, has been has seen this massive acceleration in the growth of four-wheel driving as a lifestyle, as something that family blokes do, that single guys do, that lots of girls do, just for pleasure. Going bush on the weekends with your mates. It's something that some people have been doing for a long, long time, but it's never been a major thing. And I think if you look around how quickly it's grown in the last couple of decades, it's kind of fitting that the government's recognising this. And I'm pretty sure we'll touch on this later when we start talking about track closures and things too, because it does signify a little bit of a shift in the official understanding of four-wheel driving, in my mind, anyway.
Well, every bit of recognition, I think, is really important. And the other thing is there'll be people who go to the museum who aren't thinking four-wheel driving. They're going to see that. They're going to see the story behind it. And then they're going to start wondering, I wonder what it would be like if we went four-wheel driving and camped out under the stars one day.
Well, I think so. I mean, from what I understand, the museum will have it on display. They'll probably have, clips from various DVDs showing in the background. They'll certainly, because most of the museum, being the sort of federal government's museum, most of their resources is not even in displays, it's in archives. So they'll have all those old back issues of four-wheel drive action and DVDs and anything associated with Milo is going to be stashed away in the museum there somewhere in perpetuity. So it's kind of nice. I've got to tell you, I feel pretty chuffed about it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know about you. I know that 20 years ago when I started four-wheel driving, I was doing it as a living. I mean, I didn't start then. I started a lot earlier than that. But when I started building Milo, it was a living for me, but it was a lifestyle for most people. And I've just seen it accelerate since then to the stage now where, you drive through the traffic in the morning and you'll see probably 1 out of 3, maybe 1 out of 4 vehicles on the road is a four-wheel drive that's not a soccer mum four-wheel drive. It's got a roof rack, it might have a rooftop tent, it's got an awning, a rear-mounted... I mean, you start looking at trucks and going, yep, they're one of us. And there's a lot of them out there.
There is a lot. And it does appear to be increasing, which is a good thing. So how long have you had Milo for?
Yeah, well, it would be just over 20 years. It's I've known the truck a lot longer than that because it used to be a white troop carrier with a petrol engine, a 2F, and our local scoutmaster here in Wynnum, a guy called Bob, he was a widower with 4 boys, and so he became the scoutmaster sort of almost in default because he had half the scout troop in his family. And that's what he bought Milo for in 1985 as a vehicle, a troop carrier to take the scout pack camping. So I serviced it for him for the last few years, just as a mate, basically. And then I did a couple of rust repairs for him, and the next thing I knew, he wanted to sell it, and I bought it. So yeah, over 20 years ago, I bought it. But of course, as you know, it's been through pretty much a non-stop evolution since then. In fact, just the other day, I thought I might raise some money to work on my new project by selling off some of the bits I got left over from Milo. I mean, there's a few green doors and bonnets in the shed.
Wow, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's quite a bit. Last year you had a bit of an adventure in Milo. You managed to roll it. How did that happen?
That was Milo 2.
Oh, the Milo 2, was it?
Yeah. And how did it happen? It was... Well, we built Milo 2 because I thought I was going to be taking Milo off the road to rebuild it. That was kind of my plan, and I thought it's going to take me a couple of years. I need something, a 40 series, a green 40 series to drive. Milo 2 is a ute with a Toyota 79 series dual cab back and a canopy and a rooftop tent. And those latter 2 things were partly responsible. The thing is a little bit top heavy. I can blame lots of things, but at the end of the day, we'd finished filming. I was coming down a really steep slope at Land Cruiser Park. It had been raining the day before. It was sort of a clay slope. And I did the one thing you should never do, which was to steer out of the wheel ruts. I was coming down the hill. I had the handbrake next to me. And because we were in a bit of a hurry, I was going to flick up out of the track that I was in and dropped down onto another track that was a bit of a shortcut. I flicked up, and she just kept going. It just fell over on her side, basically, on the handbrake side too, which was worse. It's all on the YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, if you want to have a look sometime, James. But
I had a look
basically
earlier today. Yeah, I'll include a link to it.
Oh, thanks, mate. Yeah, that's great. Then I can have the whole country bloody laughing at me, can't I? But the truth is that it was an old dog who knows that lesson very well, thinking that it didn't matter to him, if that makes sense. I could have done that. I know I could have done that track jump in Milo. That's not an excuse. It's still, there are some rules in four-wheel driving you really shouldn't break, and that's one of them. I'm not ashamed of it. I suppose the lesson is that if it can happen to someone who's been doing it for a living most of their life, you just need to accept that no matter how good you think you might be, there's always that chance of making a big stuff up. I was really lucky, mate. The handbrake had her arm out the window filming with a GoPro, and in fact, that's the footage you see on YouTube. The GoPro.
She pulled that hand in pretty damn quick, didn't she?
Well, she's got to be quick. She's married to me. But she did. She got that arm in. It could have been an absolute disaster, even from a truck point of view, another mud guard and a little bit of thumping around and we're back on the road. But for me, it just, once again, it just showed me that there's always that element of danger in what we do, and you can never take things for granted. And so, anyone who sees that and looks at it and goes, oh, what a goose. Yeah, you're right. Gobble, gobble, gobble. I was a bloody goose that day. I tell you what, too, coming up soon, James, this time it wasn't my fault, but it was the number one rule to avoid, I guess. We were stuck on a high country hill with a whole bunch of blokes, and someone up the top of the hill, without even thinking about it, kicked a rock. That rock came down the hill at about 100 miles an hour. It would have weighed about, 5 or 6 kilos. At the last minute, one of the guys just gave it just a little tap with his foot and deflected it so it hit the front mudguard of Milo 2 instead of coming through the windscreen. And if that had come through the windscreen, I think both the handbrake and I would have been under the dash by then, but you just don't know, It's these, we're playing in dangerous stuff sometimes, and things can get out of hand really quick. And to have that element of caution present at all times is sort of essential for four-wheel drivers.
And that's why I think it's a really important lesson. And I know when I had my little accident and took my Jeep swimming in a place and in a manner that we probably shouldn't have gone swimming, and with the equipment that it didn't have, no one thought that everyone was pretty relaxed about the situation. It wasn't like we were doing, it was right next to the camp. Everyone was just having a little bit of fun, and that's where it all came unstuck. So you just have to, you have to be on your guard all the time, don't you?
Yeah, you do. What happened?
I drove a Wrangler Unlimited through a creek crossing, potentially a little bit too fast, and got potentially a little bit too much water in the engine, and potentially that was the end of the sad Jeep, which was a tragedy. I loved that vehicle. It was an great vehicle. It was very very capable, made up for a lot of my lack of experience, and yeah, that was the last day. That was the last day that she drove, yeah.
Well, look, back in the 1980s, late 1980s, probably about 87 or 8, I used to test motorbikes for a living, and something happened. There was a plane strike. Every now and then, my mates in the motoring world, and in those days there were four-wheel drive magazines, but they were more sort of testing the latest four-wheel drives. But someone would ring up and say, hey, can you just knock us up a test on the new blah blah or whatever. I got invited out to Oran Park in the outskirts of Sydney to test the new Suzuki Vitara, and they had one there, a soft top Vitara. They had a whole bunch of them. I didn't know the course. I wasn't really a four-wheel drive journo, but I've been driving in the bush all my life, so I came charging over a hill, and there's a Suzuki going really slow through the dam at the bottom of it on one track, And then there's another track with a couple of guys who look like they're bogged on the outside of it. So I just took the middle track thinking, hey, 3 tracks, you know. The middle track was about 4 feet deep. Next thing I know, I've sunk the thing completely. I'm sitting on the roll bar with my feet on the steering wheel, trying not to get too wet. The guy from Suzuki showed up the recovery bloke, he showed up in a Toyota Land Cruiser with a PTO winch, and he said, "Oh, your hook on?" I said, "Where's the hook?" He said, "On the front chassis." He was a Japanese fella. He threw the hook over, I hooked it onto the front leg of the chassis, and then he revved up the Toyota and let the clutch out, and I'm going, "Hey, stop, stop, stop." He stretched the whole thing. It looked like a diamond by the time he pulled it out. One door was jammed shut, the other one was flapping with a 2-inch gap. And, you know, by the end of the day, they got that thing running. It sounded like it had hammers loose, rattling off the crankshaft, and it was still very much bent, but they were just trying to show water can do a lot of damage, can't it? There is something in that you must walk it before you drive it thing.
Well, the scary thing was that we'd all driven it before multiple times. It was at Talbotville.
Oh, yeah, I know Talbotville well, yeah.
Right next to the campground.
Oh, true. Okay, that's boxing.
And there's a video of it, which I'll also include.
Yeah.
And people, everyone was like, "I can't believe that you got water damage from that," because it's not that deep at all. So yeah, it was quite the tragedy.
Hit it at speed. Did you have a snorkel, James?
No, that was the bit of equipment that I kind of needed.
That's the issue. Gotcha, mate. Beautiful.
So snorkel would have saved a whole heap of unpleasantness and sadness.
Cheap insurance.
Yep. And it wasn't embarrassing at all because that was one of our big 4x4 Earth gatherings. There would have been about 100 vehicles there, and it happened about half an hour before I had to give a speech to everyone who was there.
Yeah, you got to pick your moment, haven't you, really?
That wasn't humbling in any way whatsoever.
Oh, it's good. I mean, it's good that you can own up to it. You know, I shouldn't really do this, but podcasts are great for dumping on people. I'm not going to name anybody else, but I know of at least 2 guys in my trade who've done really dumb things and then gone to huge lengths to hide it because they thought somehow that'd affect their chances, you know, affect their reputation. Whereas, you know, people like you and me, we just embrace it, mate, and go for it and try and get the lesson out there that, you know, you do something dumb, you're going to have a dumb result.
Well, and that's the really big thing because I think, you know, rollovers can happen. There's a video that I always think back on, and there's a guy who's, you know, he's driving at probably about 5 kilometers an hour and the truck just gets crossed over and it rolls over and it rolls down the side of the hill, and it's like, wow, like the guy was hardly even moving and that was enough momentum for the vehicle to roll over, and that was over the side, and they were lucky to escape with their lives. You need to be thinking about these sort of things. Sadly, we are a lighthouse to other people for what not to do.
Well, look, I mean, in my career, photographing 4-wheel drives and going to events, which was something I used to do a hell of a lot of 10 years ago, I've seen a couple of guys come severely unstuck at winch events when things have gone wrong. It's not a good thing. It's just never a good thing. But you can't wrap yourself in cotton wool in life, can you?
Well, no, because if you took that attitude, you'd never go 4-wheel driving, you'd never enjoy, and there's a lot of things that you would never do. You would lead a boring life.
Exactly right. You're not wrong.
So you mentioned that your rollover wouldn't have happened if you'd been in Milo. So what's the difference in equipment then that would have helped out?
Well, it's all about balance, really.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have realised this. Milo is a full Land Cruiser Troopy chassis that I shortened by about 1 metre at the rear. And then I put a 4-cylinder diesel in it and shifted it back 5 inches. So it's almost on the firewall. Now, what that does is it brings the centre of gravity really close to the centre of the vehicle. And it's also very light. It's got a fiberglass roof, and there's nothing in it from about waist height up. All the weight is down below. Even the batteries are slung low. With Milo 2, when we built it, its primary role was carting me around to the shows and doing a bit of four-wheel driving. So I took full advantage of the comfort factor and put the world's best rooftop tent on, which is, in my opinion, a clamshell tent. I got mine from the Bush Company up the Sunshine Coast. And so that they're quite heavy. I mean, there's probably, I've never weighed it, but I'm guessing there's about 80 kilos in it. And that's right on top of the canopy, which is aluminium. It's probably heavier than fiberglass, but it's a tall canopy. It's taller than the cabin of the 40 series. That and the fact that I've got the spare tyres on a rack right behind the window, the fact that this one runs a 12HT, so it's a full-size six-cylinder diesel instead of a lighter weight 4, and the fact that I didn't chop the chassis up because a lot of regulations have changed since I bought Milo, basically made it, Milo 2 is a lot top heavier. It won't be soon, though. Watch this space, because there's a few things happening in Roothy world, and apart from Milo 1 going into a museum, the other thing, which let's start rumours here, James. I love talking to you. We can start rumours.
Let's go for it.
Okay, well, what's happened is the production team saw the first season of a show I did, Glenn Haddon and Keno, called Low Range. We did Low Range a few years ago, and then I opted out after the first season for a lot of reasons, not the least being it was becoming very camper trailer and caravan centric, and because I'd said I'd do a year of it anyway. And someone's seen this and thought, gee, this would work really well all over the world, possibly Netflix and blah, blah, blah. We want to have a crack at this. So I've had a couple of calls in the last few weeks about it. I've put together a proposal. It looks like later this year we'll be back doing, probably won't be called Low Range, probably be called Dust 'em Up. I think they're thinking about calling it, but it'll be a four-wheel drive adventure / touring series. And to go and do that, the first thing I realised was with Milo 2, basically I've got a great truck, but unlike Milo 1, it is not uber capable off-road. It is very, very capable. It's locked both ends. It's a 40 series. It's got a bit of lift. It's got all the stuff it needs. Marks, low range gear masters. It's got all the good gear, but balance is wrong. And to all those people who get around with 40 litres of water on the roof and a spare tyre and a couple of drums of fuel, you know what I'm talking about. That's fine for touring, but when you get in a really tough situation, all that weight up top causes all sorts of dramas. And so I'll be stripping Milo down. I don't know whether I'm going to go to an aluminium tray back. I really like the big ute tub on it, but a few things will be coming off. The weight will be going lower into the truck, and I need that so that I can go hardcore four-wheel driving, because at the end of the day, James, that's the bit I love.
Exactly. And that piece about the centre of gravity, how many four-wheel drives on Fraser Island have come a cropper, driving too fast, turning too tight with way too much weight on the roof?
Oh, and look, I mean, the situation up there is that they finally, amongst the tour groups, banned using troopies, because troopies were falling over left, right and centre, because they get 10 or 11 people inside, and then they get all the camping gear for 10 or 11 on the roof. And by the time you had 2 fridgefuls of UDLs for all the, Estonian backpackers, wow, you've just got a disaster waiting to happen on the soft sand of Fraser. Plus, the hire companies wouldn't let them let their tyres down, because they were getting called out all the time with tyres being rolled off rims and all the rest of it. So now they've gone to 80 series and 100 series and, patrols, still carrying 6 people, still got too much weight on the roof, and still a crime as far as I'm concerned, because essentially what they're doing is going through those vehicles like you wouldn't believe. I mean, it's such a shame. A couple of years as a tour bus on Fraser Island, and that's it. It's not even worth wrecking. Even if it's still going, it's just a rust bucket one end to the other. But anyway.
And they're not letting the tyres down?
They now let the tyres down on the coil-sprung vehicles because they're wider track.
Yep.
But they're not going to 16. Because of the loads they're carrying, in most cases they're going to 24. Now, this is all insider information from a mechanic mate of mine who works on these things, and subject to change, if you know what I mean. And possibly we shouldn't even be talking about it, but who cares? Someone's got to. It's not that long ago that there was a proposal put forward to keep all private four-wheel drives off Fraser Island and just leave it open to the tour companies, which is an absolute disaster in a democracy. I mean,
madness, absolutely madness. Exactly.
You can't ban the average family guy from going on holiday in a part of his own country, and then say, oh, the only way you can do it is to join Yeehovel's bloody guided tour through Fraser. And then you get there and Yeehovel turns out to be a Yugoslav who's been here for 18 months, loves the place and decided to become a tour guide because that's where all the girls were. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, we seem to have got over that one. We've been pegging away a few battles lately and winning them, but I think it's got a lot to do with that change in attitude at really senior levels. Possibly something that Ricky Muir helped kick off too, just quietly. He and, some of the guys getting into Parliament who were actually four-wheel drivers, whatever their opinions. David Lionel, he's a four-wheel driver, You get a few guys like that, and then you get tourist commissions realising that, 30% of the dollars spent in their state is through four-wheel drivers. I'm talking about Northern Territory and South Australia in particular. And all of a sudden you've got this, hey, maybe these people are getting out there, maybe they have something valid, maybe we should keep some tracks open. Certainly this is a button I've been pushing all over the place, but yeah. Sorry, mate, it always gets down to politics with me, doesn't it? I do apologise.
Well, it does, but I think it's really important because of the fact that it's fundamental, from my point of view, it's fundamental to our freedoms as citizens of the country. If there's places where you can and can't go and things that you can and can't do, then are we really free? And, sometimes when you think about it from a four-wheel drive point of view, things look a little bit scary. So there you go. Some pretty exciting news about one of Australia's most iconic four-wheel drives, and I would say probably Australia's most loved four-wheel drive. A lot of people have been wondering what was going to happen to Milo, and I can't think of a more fitting place for Milo's last big journey than a museum where all of the people for a long, long time from now are going to be able to go and see exactly what this iconic vehicle has done. Hopefully you had some fun with the story. If you did, please leave a review on iTunes. It really helps us to spread the good word about getting out four-wheel driving. And don't forget, check out the 4x4 Earth store, grab your merch. It helps keep the light on for the 4x4 Earth server. That's about it. I hope to see you on the track someday. Bye.